I'm going to do a talk on the concept of an AIOS and how that relates to API consumption in the future. So we're going to start by just defining what an AIOS is, where this idea comes from, and how we should think about it going forward for our startups, for our enterprises, and so on. So if we look at the startup context, this is what I think of as the startup operating system. It's basically an interconnected jungle of various SaaS tools. I remember from my startups, it became a pretty long spreadsheet of managing various licenses for these various tools, not knowing who's actually using them and probably often overpaying. So over time, this becomes a little unwieldy. You might use certain sort of suites of software like HubSpot, which covers a few things like sales and marketing, and obviously, say the Atlassian suite, where you can do product management, project management, as well as sort of development, etc. Including, some tools for managing code as well as code pipelines. But sadly, there's no sort of like one-stop shop for everything, which means you end up connecting these different pieces through maybe Zapier, Slack connectors, etc. And I think this is not ideal. And so we could certainly think of how AI could improve this picture. Sometime last year, maybe mid last year, Andrej Karpathy of Tesla and OpenAI fame came out with a few tweets related to this idea of an AI operating system. So first he did this top picture here on the left, which was sort of a literal operating system. He's highlighting how large language models are in a way acting as the CPU, and the context window is the RAM memory for the chip. And then you've got, peripheral devices, video, audio, in and out. You can use external, software in a way like calculators, Python, etc. Accessing files, browsers, connecting to other LLMs, etc. So it's sort of a bit of a operating system diagram in a way, as a sort of singular compute unit. But then he also came up with the below tweet, which is, like if you sort of take one of these compute units, you could imagine it taking the role of a specific person inside of a company. So then it becomes this sort of hierarchy of AI operating systems taking on pretty much all of the roles of the company, and sort of poses the question, well, at some point, is that all we're going to need? This also relates to a quote from Sam Altman, where he poses the question that, at what point are we going to see the 10-person unicorn, right? Where AI is helping every single person and sort of extending the capabilities of each individual human contributor. And then at what point do you see the 1-person unicorn, where you just have pretty much the CEO and all the other teams, tasks, departments, processes are all AI controlled, either by one AI or a bunch of, myriad of various AI systems. So that's all in the future. But the question is, like, what are the sort of gaps from where we are today to that kind of situation? And so Andrej Karpathy came out with this list of sort of 10 items he thinks are holding us back that we need to solve to sort of make this real. Actually, quite a few of these are already done since last year, which is pretty weird. But a few of these are, I think, quite like fundamental. Say the self-improvement certainly is not where we're at right now, despite some early attempts like Baby AGI, etc. This is not really functional. But I think the idea of using existing software infrastructure, number 4, is really compelling for this sort of startup operating system and API interconnectivity. And that's what we're going to focus on. So if we then put this back into the context of the sort of existing startup structure, if you will, you've got these various departments like we had in the first diagram, where we're using various SaaS tools, and now we imagine this running on various AI tools, then I think at the center you'll have this human, whether it's the CEO or a senior contributor or head of a department, etc. And the way I see this working is there's a bunch of APIs connecting various data sources, potentially obviously other AI tools and external sources. And then you have this human interacting with all of these processes and this content on some higher level of abstraction. So why don't we have a look at how this might work? So again, if we go contrast this to the first image where we have these SaaS tools sort of loosely interconnected with maybe some APIs and some suites of software like G Suite and Atlassian, etc. Then I think the AI version of this is going to be much more granular. So we could imagine the following applications already being possible with AI. So certainly a lot of people are using developer copilot type of software to speed up software development, and things like synthetic users on the marketing side or content generation and sales, pretty standard by now. And so then you put these together and it starts to become this sort of suite of individual applications. So it's not like this is taking care of everything, but these are sort of point solutions within these domains. And there could be reasons why, for example, between marketing sales, you'd want to share, for example, use your synthetic users to, when you're generating your sales content, something like that, triggering emails or testing, content that you might use. And so in this scenario, we can imagine this sort of like horizontal layer of APIs connecting then to kind of your AI platform here on the bottom, which could include fine tunes, but obviously your own business data as well as your content, and then connecting to third-party APIs for other models, say like OpenAI. So this could be one sort of way for us to get started building this sort of horizontal suite of interconnected AI applications. But then you might have the question like, what about my actual core product for my software? Like this is fine for productivity, but what about my core product? So the way I imagine this is that you have the human, and the human is interacting with a sort of potentially quite complicated stack of AI and APIs and data, but the interactions for the human are very straightforward. And the language of this interaction would be facilitated by these general AI systems like large language models. And the contents of that interaction would be talking about things like tasks, insights, and making decisions, or the AI recommending decisions. But what's interesting, I think, is what's happening underneath that. So, and the top, you could imagine, and this is what people are already doing with retrieval augmented generation RAG solutions. So, retrieving content from various external sources, summarizing data, et cetera, analyzing data, and then using the large language model to provide sort of easy digestible pieces for any queries or questions that the user might have. So that's there. But then I think what's interesting is the potential interaction with narrow AI systems. So by narrow AI, I'm talking about your traditional machine learning, deep learning. So it could be some advanced things. I mean, if you think of, say, Tesla Autopilot, I mean, that's a narrow AI system. It's very advanced. It's very complicated. It's very large, consisting of dozens of different narrow AI solutions, but it's still narrow AI in this definition. But similarly, your basic regression algorithms, classification algorithms, things you would use currently in a lot of businesses for insights and recommendations, analysis, clustering, et cetera. I think that's all going to still find its usage because there are some fundamental differences between general AI and narrow AI, whereby narrow AI still has its sort of niche. For example, it could be on a cost basis, right? Like these narrow AI models are much smaller, they're much faster, they're much cheaper to train and run. But there's also some qualitative benefits that you can actually define much easier in a way the desired behavior. And this is also much easier to test those behaviors quantitatively. You can have a specific set of metrics, and you can be very confident about this narrow behavior, to the tune of 99.999% confidence, right? And because usually there's smaller networks in terms of like neural networks, actually sort of seeing the range of possible error modes and behavior kind of sort of bias issues, et cetera. Again, it's almost more manageable just because the network sizes are so much smaller. And so then you can imagine leaving things like predictions and recommendations, clustering, et cetera, to the domain of these narrow AIs. So you could imagine maybe having one large general AI system, your like GPT-5 equivalent, maybe using some helper LLMs on the side, maybe some cheaper like Llama, Gemma, open source models for some like basic content work. And then you could potentially imagine dozens, hundreds even of these narrow AI models that are specialized for specific tasks. Maybe they're even trained by the general AI on the fly, who knows? Depends how good this general AI is, basically. And then finally, there's a category of these tools. So obviously OpenAI in their API has had tool usage now since last year. So you can use a bunch of functions as well as APIs to facilitate interactions with the large language models for things that maybe the large language model is not suited for. So say something, because as of right now, yes, some systems like ChatGPT can do online searches, but for the most part, with large language models, if you want to do something like, say, ask what the weather is like, it's sort of a traditional Siri style of question, then it's not going to be in its training data. It's not going to be able to make that kind of prediction based on data from last year. So it's going to need a tool. It would just call an API to get the weather data in whatever JSON format, and then interpret that into a nicely structured sentence like, hey, it's going to be sunny, but you might want to take your umbrella out just in case. Something like that. And recently, Claude 3 also added tool usage to their API. And quite interestingly, they declared that they can use up to 300 tools at the same time. So again, you can imagine this could be a very expansive library of all manner of tools, small and large, and the general AI system, based on the user's query and the tasks that it's assigned, would then be able to figure out what kind of tools to use. And even though we're mostly thinking here about querying the AI, as we move into more agentic behavior with these general AI systems, it could be more giving the AI sort of a weekly set of goals and tasks, then it goes away, starts a bunch of agents that are doing independent tasks, reporting on their progress to the sort of master AI, all the while providing maybe some decisions or some temporary interim insights to the human to just report on progress, and then checking back at the end of the week in terms of how things have gone. So that gives you sort of a picture, I think, of how the future AI native applications could be working. Now, this is of course slightly abstract, so to make this a bit more concrete, here's an example that I saw recently in terms of maybe what AI native applications could look like and how they might differ from the sort of app paradigm that we're used to, and also like the ChatGPT paradigm that we're used to. So this was actually Gemini 1.5 Pro, and a user on Twitter had just taken a video of their workout, which is 21 minutes and 30 seconds long. Obviously shot on some kind of mobile phone. It's not high resolution, it's not on a stand, so it's pretty sort of quick and dirty, if you will. And the prompt is pretty simple, just to say, like, write JSON that tracks the exercises, etc. And finally, and quite interestingly, he's requested the JSON to also include a form critique, which is 2 to 3 sentences for each exercise, to basically judge how well this exercise is going. And below you can see the results, which are pretty interesting. It's able to pick out all the exercises, even the weights that were used. And then the first critique for these standard curls says your overall form is solid with good elbow positioning, focus on avoiding any swinging of the blah, blah, blah. And so when you put all this together, you can imagine going to the gym in the future, potentially with your phone, taking a video of yourself. Maybe you've got VR, that's part of the solution, or AR, VR goggles like Apple Vision Pro, or maybe the Ray-Ban Meta glasses. a few generations in the future. And pretty much this gives you your real-time AI personal trainer that's analyzing everything you're doing, giving you these coaching tips on the fly, and after the workout, all your nutrition and rest, recovery, sleep, etc. So it's all being taken care of by this AI. And I think, I've done some work in this health and fitness area. I think we're very far from this. If you look at sort of the state of the art now, something like a Whoop app, it's just got basically a chat GPT window where you can ask queries. But I think, again, we're still figuring out what this AI native is going to look like, again, as a play on mobile native. When the iPhone came out and apps came out, we didn't really know what to do with the paradigm. We didn't have all of the, you might say, mobile native interactions, the pinches, swipe, zooms, notifications, hamburger menu, all of these figured out. So it took a couple of years for us to find and make use of this suite of sensors and sort of the computer that never sleeps, which enabled completely different type of software than we were used to on the web or sort of desktop. And so again, I think AI native mixed with AR, VR, I think is going to give us some pretty interesting things going forward. So that's what it is. Then the question is, why do we really need it? Well, this is a slide I keep coming back to pretty often because I just find it, in a way, inexplicably fascinating that nobody decided as we increased, we went from GPT-2 to 3 to 4, that, there's no programmer that said, I want joke explanations now with GPT 3.5. Or I want, arithmetic with GPT-2, or I want inference chains with GPT-4. This diagram, by the way, is from Palm, so it's pretty old school in a way. It's from the Palm 2 model, which was a 540 billion parameter model. But the point here is that all of these capabilities that we see with, ChatGPT that sort of changed our view of AI, they're all emergent, 100% emergent. So it's just a function of more data, bigger networks, basically more parameters, and then longer training. And in fact, if you look at what Llama 3 has just done last week, it's pretty fascinating that they've done a GPT 3.5 turbo level model with a 7 billion parameter model. So which means that they just had way more data, up to 15 trillion tokens, which is the largest data set ever used, as far as we know. And so they were able to use this gigantic training data to pack even more densely some of these parameters that we saw with much larger models like this Palm 2 model into a very small model. So I think going forward, this sort of tree is going to keep growing, but to some degree, it's also going to keep shrinking, in that we're just going to pack more and more and more and more capability. I think to a point whereby we should expect pretty soon to be running GPT-4 level models just on our phones and even Apple Watches. So really something like a Siri 2.0 with a more of like the level of capability you would see in the movie Her, I think is not in the too distant future. Maybe lacking the consciousness, hopefully. So another data point for us, this is from ARC's Big Ideas report, is that the sort of reasonable forecast for us achieving broadly human level AI would point to somewhere in the 2030 range, which is still pretty crazy. But the forecast error, in a way, has just kept on this sort of accelerating trajectory, which is pretty much 2 years from now, which is, it's pretty unfathomable. But it just gives you the sense that, like, there's not really a time window for you to, build startups that don't have AI. It's just, I think, not optional at this point. And if you saw the latest talk from Sam Altman, he's talking about a lot of startups who are building their startups on the basis of GPT-4 companies building their products on the basis of the capabilities of GPT-4, and he's basically making the case that once GPT-5 comes out, you're all going to be steamrolled. So you have to already be thinking about the long game here of human level AI and what that is going to do to software business as we know it, if you want to be relevant in that world. So I think, again, when I look at the big picture here, and you look at sort of the big transformations we've been through, the Industrial Revolution, potentially the Information Revolution, which is sort of the age of the internet, I think where we're going now is what I would call the Intelligence Revolution, where, if you've heard this VC term, marginal cost of software, something like an Airbnb or Uber, doesn't matter if they spent hundreds of millions building their apps and websites, compared to the scale of the business, revenues of billions of dollars, software is actually marginal. It's not meaningful, especially at the transaction scale, like how much software costs can you allocate to each Uber ride or each Spotify play, etc. It would be so small that you can really count it, so it's marginal. Well, I think we're now entering a marginal cost of intelligence, which is, right now you have to wait 18 years or more, and arguably you could say the cost is maybe $100,000 to raise a human, maybe more, depending on where you live. So intelligence is extremely costly. Also, when you're hiring people, you have to train people. People have to go to universities, training courses on AI. They're very slow to learn, etc. Whereas if you could imagine having endless copies of GPT-7 running on all of your devices, it's basically free. It's human level, maybe even sort of Elon Musk, maybe Einstein level. And so what do you do with that if you can have as many as you like? What do you do with a million Einsteins? I don't know. Maybe we, to some degree, even run out of creativity ourselves on what to do with all this intelligence. But back in the real world, this is anecdotally something I've heard multiple times in the past few months, especially in Silicon Valley, that startups are moving faster with AI in terms of MVPs, right? So what if instead of 6 months, it's now 6 weeks? And if that's the case, you need fewer people, you need less capital raised, which means less dilution. And so now, we're not in the realm of a 2-person unicorn quite yet, but certainly you could be in the realm of a 2-person MVP, 2-person seed round, where it's just the, maybe it's the CEO and the CTO and a few AI systems, and we'll start seeing how far you can go with that. And it might be longer and longer in the years to come. Okay, so then some thoughts about actually how to build this, if you're following along so far. So I'm calling this framework the AI native startup. And this is work that I've done over the past year and a half, consulting, advising, investing in AI startups, working with existing enterprise businesses, doing their AI transformations. And I've come up with a sort of 4-step circular process, which begins with research, then proceeds into discovery, basically finding the use cases, actually development, execution, and then scaling, and then rinse and repeat. So let's go through each of these steps. So the first thing to say here about AI research is, I've been doing and running AI research teams for the past 7 years in my startups. And a lot of times it didn't produce anything, but some of the things that it did produce ended up being some of the most valuable IP for the company. And so R&D is never easy. It's a lot of dead ends. It feels a lot of the time that you're just wasting money and resources. But say in the startup context, it could be pretty small scale. It could just be a part-time thing that some of your people are doing, reading some papers, given the pace of things, just keeping up with AI Twitter, let alone AI, research papers is a tall order. But still, I think it's worth, especially in your domain. So let's say you're more of a scientific or engineering domain. There's a couple of things here just that Google has done in the past couple of years on the sort of back of their groundbreaking AlphaFold work that I think people should look into, right? So for example, they did a whole project called GNOME on materials discovery, where they found 380,000 new materials, of which 500 were promising, basically potentially new molecules in chemistry for better batteries, lithium-ion batteries. So it could be incredibly valuable. And most of this work is actually sort of non-LLM work. It's on the basis of reinforcement learning, and now with some of these actually combining, like I had in my slide, the benefits of, let's say, search brought to you by the reinforcement learning and Monte Carlo search domain, as well as the sort of generative abilities of large language models. And so they've done interesting things in the space of maths and geometry, for example, if you want to look into that. But overall, I think it's just worth having an ongoing process of looking at what's going on, not just what's the latest large language model, but what's happening within your domain. If you're a deep tech company in particular, I think you'll find a lot of interesting stuff, which is also open source. Most of these Google projects are in fact open source. So then you get into the exploration phase. So over the last 6 months, I've probably done 40 of these workshops. And the basic thing you want to do is understand the overlap or the intersection of human work and AI capabilities. And this is a framework that I've been applying, whereby you start by describing the sort of key roles in a business process. These could be customer roles or internal roles. In the case of early stage startups, you have few people, so it's probably going to be more customer roles. And you start breaking those roles down into processes and tasks, in terms of tasks that take a lot of time or tasks that are particularly high value currently. And then what you start doing is forming connections in terms of how AI capabilities potentially transform that picture. So maybe you've got like very unique high value human tasks. So say a couple months ago, maybe video production would have been right up there. If you wanted to shoot some ad in Antarctica, you would have had to, spend a lot of money, probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions, flying the crew out there, actors, animals, just a horrific project to manage and get the result. Whereas now, we know that this is a low value, highly repetitive task, costs you maybe a few $100s to generate a few minute clip using Sora, and you can just put it wherever you want in there. So this is dramatically shifted. But generally speaking, this is a sort of mapping you want to do for your business domain to understand how AI can shift the overall balance of knowledge work and what that tells you about how to structure your business going forward. Now, what it's also going to do is generate a bunch of concepts and ideas for products, features that you can build using AI. Once you start building out these applications, I think it's worth certainly starting from the assumption of like, hey, what's off the shelf that I can use, whether it's building applications with Vercel, Streamlit, etc. Obviously using whatever the best models are, be it Llama, Claude, GPT, etc. Maybe some Gemini models. But then in the middle, I think when you're talking about the productivity suite, unless you're say like an HR startup, for the most part, and if you're a deep tech startup building hardware, you're not going to want to worry too much about HR. In which case, you could just use whatever off the shelf. Like if I don't know, say Xero, NetSuite, Bamboo, et cetera, these sort of back office application suites, come up with some killer HR tool using AI, do that. If it's some startup you find online, do that. Whatever works, that's fine. Just use the best available AI tools for this category. So these would be the sort of horizontal applications. But then for sort of your own business domain, when you start getting to the sort of software, operations, product side of things, I think is where you want to start focusing on building your own, again, using the template that we talked about in the context of like AI native applications. And then finally, there's a question of how do you put these pieces together? So this is a bit of a stack that I've thought through, whereby if you start from the bottom, I think for most startups, you're not going to want to spend a huge amount building your own, GPU clusters and compute. You'll want to get access to credits from Microsoft, Google, et cetera, as much as you can. You're going to use the best narrow models, whether it's reinforcement learning or deep learning models, open source, whatever you find. And then on the general model side, it could be a mixture of commercial models as well as some open source models. Some of those you might want to run yourself, but by and large, you're going to be using APIs to do that. So this is the sort of, from your perspective, the sort of commodity tier. And then there's a sort of tactical tier. Again, this would be, in a way, your sort of ML AI ops stack, where you build pieces, reusable pieces of code, maybe on top of some platforms and frameworks. And then I think very importantly, we should think about adding and maintaining layers safe AI. There's talk of regulation in the EU and anti-regulation in the US, but I think we're still underestimating the importance of this, whether it's protecting data, protecting users. I think the more powerful these AI systems get, the more of a focus item this is going to be. So I think it does make sense to invest early in this. Looking at tools, platforms in that area, and just generally having an approach and framework that you apply consistently across all of these AI systems. And then finally, you get to your sort of AI systems, which could be taking the form of various assistants or agents as we move into the sort of more independent AI agent domain, probably later this year. Cool. So I hope that's helpful, and you guys are going to go on your way to build your own AI operating systems. If you want to reach out to me to ask questions about any of this, you can find my socials there on the left, and you can scan the QR code to check out my Substack, where I write about these kinds of topics now and then. Thanks for your time.